We're recording. All right, so this is chapter 3, review questions. We'll see what we can get through. We're recording this because we currently have no internet. So first question, what is an element? Or one of you answer.
Wait, didn't the text say that an element is when a material is in its purest form and cannot be changed chemically?
Okay. Well, it can be changed chemically, but it cannot be broken down.
Oh, broke it, that's what I meant to
Chemically.
say.
All right, so an element consists of only one kind of atom and cannot be broken down into a simpler substance. If you have H2O, that's a compound. I can separate the hydrogen atoms from the oxygen atoms. So I can break a compound into simpler substances, the elements that make it up.
I'm very confused as to how two gases manage to make something, but
How to make one?
yeah, oxygen and hydrogen are two different gases, and how they manage to make a liquid.
Because when they bond, they form a different product with different chemical properties, and so it's a liquid. So one thing to keep in mind, now that I've plugged in the USB, this should work. Oh, but I might have to calibrate it. Oh, no I don't, yay. But I don't want you. What I want is that.
Are we gonna have to redo the video?
Nah. This is what would have happened if I was in class. Alright, so if you see something like this, alright, there's 3 atoms. But they're not bonded to each other, so that's an element. Alright, on the other hand, if you see something like this, okay, here we have 2 different atoms, but they're bonded together, so this is a compound, right? And then if you see something like this, or maybe even like this, now we have a mixture. We have 2 different elements, and we have a molecule of those elements chemically combined, so that would be a mixture. So sometimes on test questions, you'll see diagrams like this, and they'll ask you, is this an element, compound, or mixture? All right, so now if I go back to there, back to the beginning. All right, so elements consist of only one kind of atom and cannot be broken down into simpler things. Right? This is, from my perspective, this is kind of a pedantic question. I don't know, maybe high school chemistry, you might need to know this difference. I'm not going to test you on this difference. But molecules are any time we have more than one atom bonded together. Compounds have more than one element bonded together.
Wait, so, like that example, because it's the same element, that would make it a molecule and not a compound?
So, for example, if you have hydrogen and hydrogen, okay, that's H2. This is a molecule of hydrogen, but this would be an atom of hydrogen.
So because it's
Okay.
the same element put together, that's making it a molecule,
Right, but not a compound.
because it's not 2 different elements.
But if we have H2O,
It's a compound.
okay? That's the oxygen. So this would be a molecule of H2O, which is also a compound because it has more than one kind of atom. Again, that is very, very detailed, and I don't know that we need to be super concerned with that, but. All right, this we need to be concerned with. What makes up an atom?
Neutrons and electrons.
Neutrons, electrons,
Proton.
protons. Which ones are positive?
Oh, the
Proton.
the neutrons are neutral and the protons
Proton.
are positive and the electrons are negative.
Okay. So, to summarize what you said,
Like the
We
neutrons
have-
and the protons are on the inside and then the electrons are on the outside.
okay, so you have a positive proton, neutral neutrons, and negative electrons. So this center made up of protons and neutrons, that's the nucleus. This is not the same nucleus as the cell nucleus. Nucleus just means the center, okay? All right, so protons, neutrons, and then in the electron cloud, you have the electrons. You will be expected to know these three parts, that they are positive, negative, and neutral, that protons and neutrons are the nucleus, and the electrons are outside the nucleus. Boop, 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 boop. By the way, Quiz Friday. Oops. Alright, so nucleus of an atom consists of positive protons and neutral neutrons. The nucleus is surrounded by negative electrons. Who is credited with developing the periodic table? That's
Sorry,
Dmitry Mendeleev.
I knew his name started with a D, I just didn't remember what it was.
And then, real quick, the thing with the periodic table is and this is what made Dimitri's periodic table so useful, is that everything in a group has similar properties. So the up and down columns are called groups. And then the horizontal rows are called periods. All right,
What is that?
so if you think about a calendar,
You
all right.
have the days and the weeks separated.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right. So you have Monday, you have Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And then you have Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So in a group, you have similar properties. Now, maybe this Sunday you went to the family dinner and you stayed for 2 hours. Maybe this Sunday you went to the family dinner and only stayed for an hour. But there are similar properties every Sunday. This group, all the elements have similar properties. And maybe, you are doing some last minute work before school, and then you have an A day, then a B day, and then an A day, then a B day, and then an A day. Okay? And that pattern repeats from this period to this period to this period, so forth and so on. Okay? So the days of the week are periodic. They repeat on a regular basis. So the pattern in this row repeats in this row, and this row, and this row, and so forth and so on.
Wait, so the properties repeat? Like,
Yes.
oh,
We'll get more into that when we do the chemistry unit. I'm just front loading a little bit. And maybe getting ahead of myself a little bit, but that's okay. If I have a chance to review something, then I'm gonna take it. Alright, good. Alright, so that takes us to 3.2. Is it still recording? What are the four main types of organic compounds? What you think?
Is it is that like the domains or no?
Mhm.
Okay, now.
We said there are four types of organic compounds that every living thing needs. Carbohydrates, one.
Protein?
Protein,
Oh, those.
Sodium? No.
no.
Lipid, is that one?
Lipids, one.
And then
Carbohydrates, lipids,
Mhm.
nucleic acids, and proteins. Okay, this is a recall question, so all you have to do is list them, but notice that I made this a complete sentence. Look at this sentence, it's nice and complete, okay? And here's the cool thing, I could delete this question, I still have something usable to study. Okay? If I just wrote down carbohydrate, lipid, nucleic acid, protein,
what are we supposed to do?
without the question, I don't know what that is. It's just words. Okay, so writing a complete sentence makes you think about it, and thinking about it helps you learn it. And it also makes it easier for you to study. Okay. So when we went over this section, I told you need to know these four and what they're made of. What are the monomers that make them?
So who?
Okay? Carbohydrates are made of simple sugars. This is where you hear people talk about complex carbohydrates versus not complex carbohydrates. The simple sugars versus the high fructose corn syrups and whatnot. Proteins are made of amino acids. Okay? Nucleic acids, such as DNA and RNA, are made of nucleotides.
What is the difference between DNA and RNA?
So, what's the difference between DNA and RNA? DNA is two strands, RNA is one strand. DNA is the program or the operating system for your cell. Okay? RNA is a messenger, basically, between the operating system of the cell and the factory of the cell that actually makes the protein.
So DNA tells the RNA what to make.
Kind of, yes.
I knew the strands were different. I knew DNA had two and RNA only had one, but I never knew like what they did.
Well, another way of thinking about it, if this is the plan, the architect's plan, okay, the architect has spent hours and hours and hours and hours making up the design for the building. They're not taking their only copy and sending it out to the construction site. So they make a copy of it, and they send the copy to the construction site. And that's, the RNA is that copy. All right, what are examples of lipids? Okay, fats, oils, waxes are all lipids. Olive oil, vegetable oil, lard. Yeah, but it makes fried food taste so good. Examples are proteins, muscle fibers, enzymes, antibodies.
Bless you.
Excuse me, this is nothing to sneeze at.
Who said your name?
Wait, was that supposed to be the joke?
Yes, that was a joke.
Oh.
All right, did everybody get these?
Yeah, I didn't get.
So at home, you should probably be going through this. These are probably in your Google Drive, okay?
It's in the textbook.
So you can probably check your answers there and correct them if you need to. You can also be making notes in a notebook because you have a quiz when? That's right, Friday. All right, good. All right, so this is 3.3, I believe. What type of microscope would you use to study the structures inside of a cell? It says structures inside of a cell. So you need to think organelles. We're talking about the tiny little organelles, the ribosomes, the Golgi apparatus, the mitochondria. So you're going to use an electron microscope. A light microscope would only allow you to see the cell, not the.
What do the organelles look like?
It depends on which one.
Like, let's see any of them. Like, do they have like a general shape, or do they all like really specific shapes?
They're all kind of specific in their shape. What are 3 parts of the cell theory? All organisms are composed of cells.
All cells come
Okay.
from other cells?
All cells are the basic unit of life, and cells only come from other cells.
You can't make a cell.
Okay. So according to the cell theory, could you combine molecules to make a cell?
No, because molecules aren't alive, and because cells come from other cells.
Right. Cells only come from pre-existing cells.
That looks like it says pricks.
A lot of people got this one wrong when I was grading this because I honestly think they didn't stop to think about it. Take your time, think about them. The questions usually start off, the first 1 or 2 are kind of like recall questions, like where you just have to remember something you read. And then they get into thinking questions.
I thought it said cell the first time until you told me it said molecule. And I was like,
Give an example of a specialized cell: nerve cell, blood cell, muscle cell, kidney cell, brain cell, eyeball cell, skin cell.
hair cells.
Okay?
Isn't hair dead cells?
No, it's just
No.
protein.
Oh. Someone told me hair was dead.
But it is dead, it's not living. Your hair follicle is alive because it has to make the hair. What is a tissue? Anybody in the studio audience?
A group of cells put together.
Okay. Group of cells working together make up a tissue. And if we have different tissues working together to perform the same job,
They make organs.
they make an organ.
And then organs make organ systems, and then organ systems make organisms.
That's right. Let's see, does all that show up on the screen? Yep. Hopefully you guys can, you should be able to see this when it's on your screen. Hopefully you're watching it on a computer or something. But even on your phone, I think you have to go landscape instead of portrait. All right. What do all cells have in common? There's certain things all cells have.
They're all alive.
Well, yes.
They come from others.
Wh-
Oh, they have.
What parts do
they
all
have-
cells
they all
have?
have a
Cell wall?
nucleus?
Okay, no, they don't all have a nucleus.
Okay.
Remember,
Cell.
prokaryotes do not have a nucleus.
A cell wall.
Not a cell wall, but a cell
Membrane?
membrane, right? Because all cells have to have something to surround it and to put it in place. Right? Now you mentioned the nucleus. What's inside of the nucleus?
The membrane is inside the nucleus. I think. I don't know. The membrane, I'm very confused.
All right. So we have a cell membrane.
Okay.
Okay. What tells the cell what to do?
The
What's the operating system?
mitochondria.
Nope.
No,
That's the powerhouse.
Ah.
Oh, that's the nucleus.
Okay. So, but not every cell has a nucleus, but what's inside the nucleus that tells the cell what to do?
The nucleus.
Nope.
I'm trying to.
It's an organelle.
Mhm.
DNA.
DNA. All right. So every cell has to have a cell membrane. Every cell has DNA. Some eukaryotes, for example, the DNA is enclosed in a membrane. We call that the nucleus. And then some cells, like prokaryotes, the DNA is just there in the cell. It's not floating around willy-nilly. It's all together, but it's just there. Now, what's filling up this cell? What's the goo that fills up the cell?
The gold Are we talking about different organelles or no?
It's like a jelly-like.
Because
thing.
only, yes, the jelly-like substance.
Oh.
Only eukaryotes have organelles, except for the ribosome.
Okay.
But, so that's the other one. I just blurted one out. So every cell has to have ribosomes. Because ribosomes make proteins. Okay? So every cell has DNA, a cell membrane, ribosomes. What's the jelly-like stuff that fills up the cell?
What does it start with?
Hmm?
What does it start with?
It starts with a letter.
What letter does it start with?
It starts with C. So the stuff that fills up the cell surrounds the organelles. If the cell has organelles, allows chemical reactions to take place inside this jelly-like substance. Well, let's see here. It's in a cell, right? So we need a prefix that means cell, and it's kind of a goo. So we need a prefix that kind of means goo, not literally. I'm kind of making that part up, but so a prefix that means cell would be cyto.
Oh,
Cytoplasm?
cytojelly? Oh,
Cytoplasm. Okay, so the cytoplasm
Cytoplasm.
is the goo.
I got confused with the cytoplasm and the other one, cyto something.
Cytosol.
Yeah, that's what I
We'll talk about the difference in a second. So all cells, whether it's a bacteria, whether it's a bacteria or an elephant cell, ostrich cell, oak tree cell, every cell we know to exist has DNA, because something has to tell the cell what to do. Ribosomes, because it's got to have proteins, it's got to have enzymes and stuff. Cytoplasm to fill it up and surround the stuff, and then cell membrane to keep it all together and control what goes in and out. All right, what are organelles? Well, literally, organelle means tiny organs, but they're not really organs because they're not made of tissues, and so they're not really organs, but they're analogous to organs.
Wait, so aren't organelles the smallest living things, or are those not
No,
alive?
because they're not living on their own.
Oh, so they all have to work together to live.
Kind of. They perform functions in the cell, but they are not themselves a
Without,
living thing.
without every other part?
Right. It,
Oh,
It's kind of like you wouldn't say a lung is a human. It's a part of a human. It performs a function in a human, but the lung itself is not a human.
oh, okay.
So the mitochondria performs a function in cells, but it is not itself a cell.
Oh.
Compare the location of genetic material in eukaryotic cells to prokaryotic cells. So here's the thing that I can't show you right now because we don't have internet. At least I don't think we have internet. Let's check real quick. Oh, it's not gonna let me because that's full screen. All right, anyway. I'll just go there. So here's the thing I learned. So we have prokaryote, right? All right, so pro means before. this part, the karyote, it refers, I believe, to nut. So what they did is they looked at the cell. Remember, this is hundreds of years ago, okay? I see you back there giggling. Stop that. Okay. Now, so they looked at the cell, and this is basically what they saw. Okay? They saw that cell membrane, and they saw a dark spot. Okay? So, but then they looked at other cells,
And they
and
saw the opposite.
maybe they saw a squiggly that was, we know now, the DNA. But it didn't have a membrane around it. So what they said is this is a prokaryotic cell, okay? Because it's before this kernel. Maybe that would be a better word. Okay? And then this cell, on the other hand, has a good kernel.
A good kernel?
Okay? So they called it a eukaryote. Eu means good. EU means good. So that's why we call them eukaryotes and prokaryotes. So let's go back to there. So the difference is, in a eukaryotic cell, a cell with a good kernel, the DNA is in the nucleus. The nucleus is that good kernel. In a prokaryote, we believe, evolved before the eukaryotes, so before the kernel, so their DNA is just floating in the cytoplasm. All right. What do ribosomes make?
Protein.
They make proteins. Again, notice, because I keep pointing this out because I keep having to comment this. Complete sentences. Complete thoughts. What are the only prokaryotes? Archaea and bacteria are the only prokaryotes. Prokaryotes are multicellular. Which ones? None. None of them. All prokaryotic organisms are unicellular. Period. All right. Either of you need this?
What? I need it. I think I might have gotten it wrong sometime.
All right, and 3.5. What is the plasma membrane? It surrounds and controls what enters and leaves the cell. It's like the big castle wall.
It's like a filter.
Okay? It's the wall around Ba Sing Se. Okay? Describe a phospholipid. So with a phospholipid, okay, you have the phosphate head, that's the phospho, and then you have two fatty acid tails. So those are the lipids. So we call it a phospholipid. This side loves H2O. Okay? This side
Can't stand it.
hates H2O. Okay? So what happens is this molecule wants to just naturally orient itself so that this end is pointed towards the H2O and this end is not. And so when you get enough of these together, they can line up and they start making this thing. And then if some more come along, then they can line up on the other side. And so now we have a phospholipid bilayer. And this can keep going around and it can make a full circle,
That's a plasma membrane.
and then you have a plasma membrane. Let's see here. All right, so phospholipids have a hydrophilic head and a hydrophobic tail. What are the components of cytosol? This is another one of those things that, for us, I think is overly pedantic. but
Overly who?
pedantic. It means overly detailed or overly concerned with details. This point, this difference is not going to show up on an EOG or a test I give you. But cytosol is made of H2O and then other molecules like enzymes. Okay? The difference between cytosol and cytoplasm is the cytoplasm includes the organelles. So if you could suck the water and the enzymes and stuff out of a cell, and that's all you got, that would be cytosol. But if you sucked out the water, the enzymes, and the mitochondria, then that's cytoplasm. That's it. That's the difference. I'm not worried about that difference. Cytosol, cytoplasm, for our purposes, same thing. Let's see here. Did you have a question?
No, I just answered it.
Okay. So permeable means that things can pass through. Okay? Most people do not want a permeable house. They don't want random people going in and out of their house. Semi-permeable means that some things can pass through and some things cannot. Your house is probably semi-permeable.
Because if
Okay.
you're a key, you can get in.
Right. People who live there can go in and out. People who don't live there should not be going in and out. What's the difference between cytosol and cytoplasm? Okay. Cytoplasm is the cytosol and the organelles. That, and again, I'm not overly worried about that difference. Okay. Nucleus of a cell contains the DNA. You should know that. There's a lot of organelles I'm not going to worry about you knowing. You should know that the nucleus contains the DNA. Okay? And remember, the DNA is the operating system of the cell. What is a chromosome? Where is it located? Chromosomes are DNA wrapped around a protein, and they're located in the nucleus. So, real quick. So you have a cell, right? And it's got a nucleus, and inside the nucleus you have DNA. At some point, this cell is going to be like, you know what? I need to replace myself, okay? This dumb teacher has cut his finger again, so I got to divide and repair the wound. So in order to do that, it has to go through some steps. The first step is it's going to break down the nuclear membrane. Okay, so we still have DNA. Then the DNA is going to start condensing. And so what's going to happen is it's going to start, these long molecules are going to start wrapping around a protein. And so we end up with chromosomes like this. Right? And, oh, by the way, it got copied. The DNA got copied, and then it divided. And then you're going to have the cell, it's going to go into metaphase, and the chromosomes get pulled apart so that there's a copy of the DNA for each new cell, and then it's going to divide, and the nucleus starts reforming, and the DNA starts uncoiling, and then eventually you have two complete cells with a nucleus with DNA. That's called mitosis. Okay? So that's when chromosomes are important, during mitosis. There's also something called meiosis, but we'll talk about that later. All right, how many chromosomes do humans have? This is a little tricky. Anytime you have a question about this, you need to pay very close attention to the way it's worded, okay? Because humans have a total 46 chromosomes. You got 23 from mom, 23 from dad, for a total of 46. And so that's 23 pairs. So the reason I say be careful is the question says, how many pairs of chromosomes do humans have? The answer is 23. If it says, how many chromosomes in total does a human have? The answer is 46. Okay? If it just says how many chromosomes, either of these are fine. Okay? So just make sure you pay attention to the wording of the question. The nucleolus makes ribosomes, and ribosomes make proteins.
So the nucleolus.
And then that's all I got.
indirectly- So the nucleolus indirectly makes protein.
Indirectly, yes.